I'm Dexter Hodder. I'm the Director of Research and Education with the John Prince Research Forest. Fishers are currently, at least the central interior population, are actually red listed, which means they're threatened with a risk of extinction or extirpation, in this case, in population. So any species that's at risk of not having enough numbers, we want to understand them so that we can bring those numbers back. So that might be just because you value them as a cool wildlife species. That might be because you value them because you're a trapper and you actually utilize those animals. Fishers are a member of this really cool family called mustelids, or people often refer to them as weasels, but they're a pretty big weasel. So they're sort of in between a marten and say a river otter or a wolverine. So they're a pretty big species. They eat a lot of different prey, small mammals, snowshoe hares, things like that. But they're also one of the few species that can specialize on eating porcupines. So they can actually catch porcupines without getting too many quills in them, which is a pretty good talent for a critter. So they generally like habitats that are older forest with a lot of complexity. They require very specific denning trees. So they're very fussy about the kinds of trees they need to den in to have their young. And they are usually in this area, it's cottonwood trees. So large cottonwood trees with cavities in them. A really interesting fact about fishers is that, well, most of the mustelids have what we call sexual dimorphism. So the males are much bigger than the females. And the females utilize this during denning. So because they're much smaller, they choose dens with an entrance that they can just barely fit in, so that the males can't get in and kill their babies. So it's a very cool adaptation to protect their young. The research we're doing with fishers are sort of two pieces. One is looking at how can we improve forestry practices. So that's a pretty applied, specific question. The other thing we're trying to understand is how are fishers doing on the landscape? And so we don't have very much data here in sort of the central interior in the subboreal spruce zone. So this winter we have about 150 cameras, 154 camera traps that we use to record fishers across the landscape. And so we're looking at what kinds of habitat do we find fishers in? And then we're also putting in what we call fisher boxes or a fisher trap, which is just to get the animal to go inside so that we can get a hair sample from it. So we have a little sticky pad. So as they try to get inside to get a small bait, they leave us a little bit of hair. And from that hair, we can get a lot of information, like who that fisher is, so the individual ID, whether it's a male or a female. We can also take a stab at using stable isotopes to get diet information. So it's a very important sample. We can also take that identification and do a population density estimate across the region, which is the really important piece. In this block, we have sort of two types of trees left standing. One are large Douglas fir, and that's a general ecological target we have on our stand. So we like to keep big Douglas fir. So they're not always the greatest timber, but they're very valuable ecologically. So we like to keep some of those standing. And we don't really care too much if they fall over. They're just as valuable laying down as they are standing up. In a natural forest, trees will fall down. They will pile up on each other from either being killed by insects or wind throw. And we're just using slash piles to mimic some of that when we remove most of that debris in our logging operations. In this block specifically, and specific to fishers, are large spruce trees that have basically a disease infecting them called rest brooms. And fishers tend to like to get up and sit on these rest brooms as they search for prey in the stand. So then we try to keep some of these in the stand, both for them to utilize, but to make sure that condition continues to persist in our stands going forward. Natural forests are messy Forest, they have lots of understory, they have overstory, there's a lot of layers. So when we log, we generally lose that structure. And that can have a big impact on animals that depend on it for a whole rotation of forests, which means 100, 120 years. So we really want to think about how animals utilize structure. So dense understory can provide habitat for prey, like snowshoe hares or small mammals, which things like fishers like to eat. So then we want to mimic that in our forest management. So we want to make our blocks as messy as we can to try and maintain some of those values. We're testing a very specific set of management guidelines to see if we can maintain fisher values in a stand while also making money from log sales, which is our important value for doing this, but also making them functional wildlife habitat as well for the long term.